Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a tour of Washington, D.C., but, we're skipping the usual spots. We're going looking for the secrets hidden right in the city's stone monuments, the stories you definitely won't find in any guidebook.
Yeah, we're going to uncover a story that's literally written in stone, a kind of hidden history of the nation's capital. We'll dive into some mysterious Masonic symbols, unsolved codes, and the deep, deep controversies memorialized in the city's most famous landmarks. Okay, let's dive right in. Here's our itinerary for today. We'll start with the very first marks made on the city, then look at a figure who still sparks debate. We'll try to crack some codes, see a founding father in a totally new light, and we'll finish up with the epic story of the city's tallest structure. Our tour begins at the very edge of the city with the markers that first drew its borders. And in a way, you could say these are the first federal monuments ever created. So back in 1791, Freemasons laid out these 40 boundary stones with a full Masonic ceremony. This was way more than just surveying. It was a deeply symbolic act. The stones facing inward are actually inscribed jurisdiction of the United States, while the other side say either Maryland or Virginia. And here's what's so cool. A real piece of living history. 38 of the original 40 stones are still standing today. I mean, they're just tucked away in neighborhoods, parks, even some private yards. Silent witnesses to the city's very beginning. All right, let's head over to Judiciary Square for our next stop. We're going to look at a monument that has sparked fierce debate for decades, and it represents a much more conflicted side of American history. So, who was Albert Pike? Well, he was a complicated guy, a lawyer, an author, a Confederate general, and a really influential leader in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. But his role in the Confederacy, that's just the start of the controversy. The real heart of the debate is his connection to the Ku Klux Klan. Now, while there's no definitive proof, no smoking gun, that Pike was a leader in the Klan, as some people claim, his own words are pretty revealing. This quote shows his clear intent to organize white Southerners against black political power right after the Civil War. Interestingly, President Johnson, who was a Freemason himself, pardoned Pike, and the Masons erected the statue years later. But it remains one of D.C.'s most divisive landmarks, a constant stone reminder of the unresolved conflicts from that era. Okay, time to switch gears. Our tour is taking a modern turn now, away from historical controversy and straight into a cryptographic mystery. We're heading just outside the city to the headquarters of the CIA. Right there in the CIA courtyard stands Kryptos, a huge copper sculpture covered in almost 1,800 characters. Sure, it's a piece of art, but it's also one of the world's most famous unsolved puzzles. Codebreakers have managed to crack the first 3 sections, but that fourth and final passage, it's still a complete mystery. The artist James Sanborn has offered just one really tantalizing clue. He revealed that the letters WW in the second passage, which has been solved, are a key to that final part. So the question is, who or what is WW? A person? A place? The answer is locked away in those final 97 characters. Not far from there, another sculpture hides its meaning, but in a much more direct way. This is Vox Populi, which means voice of the people, right outside the IRS building. Its symbolism isn't secret or cryptic, it's all about civic duty. One hand is pointing up like it's making a point in a debate, while the other is open, representing an oath or casting a vote. It's a visual reminder of democracy in action. All right. Next up, we're going to take a look at the founder of the nation himself, George Washington. You see him everywhere in D.C., of course, but a few of his depictions are, well, they're pretty far from what you'd expect. This might be the single strangest depiction of Washington ever created. Congress actually commissioned it, and the sculptor, Horatio Greeno, patterned it after a classical statue of Zeus. The result was this massive 20-ton, bare-chested Washington sitting on a throne. It was so shocking to people at the time that it was eventually moved out of the Capitol. Now, the statue's unusual pose, one hand pointing up, the other down, has led to some wild fringe theories connecting it to the occult figure Baphomet. But a simple look at the timeline completely debunks this. The statue was finished a full 15 years before the famous drawing of Baphomet was even created. This also brings us to another key part of Washington's public image. The Freemasons were incredibly proud of their famous member, and they circulated tons of images of him in full Masonic gear, wearing his apron and the jewel of his office as master of his lodge in Alexandria.
Okay, for our final stop, we've arrived at the city's most iconic structure. It just dominates the skyline, but the story of its construction was as dramatic and troubled as the man it honors.
You know, the Washington Monument we all know today, it's not what was originally planned. Not even close. The first design was incredibly elaborate. It had this massive circular temple at the base, with a statue of Washington driving a chariot over the entrance. It was a grand vision, but way, way too expensive to actually build. The construction was basically a 50-year saga. It started with a Masonic ceremony in 1848, but things went south fast. A radical anti-immigrant and anti-Catholic group called the Know-Nothings literally stole a memorial stone that had been donated by the Pope and chucked it into the Potomac River. The scandal caused donations to completely dry up, and construction just ground to a halt for over 20 years. The very, very tip of the monument is made of a metal that was considered precious back in the 19th century: aluminum. This little 100-ounce pyramid was the largest piece of solid aluminum ever cast at the time, and they polished it like a jewel. On its eastern face, pointing toward the rising sun, is the inscription Laus Deo, which is Latin for "Praise be to God." And if you look really closely at the monument today, about 150 feet up, you can still see the evidence of its troubled past. There is a distinct line where the color of the marble changes. That's the scar, marking where construction stopped for 22 years before it finally started up again with stone from a different quarry. So when you really look at them, these landmarks are so much more than just tourist attractions. They are archives of the nation's triumphs, its deepest conflicts, and its most enduring mysteries, all carved into stone for us to try and figure out. And this really brings us to a final thought. Every landmark, every statue, every old building has a story. It just makes you wonder, what stories are hidden in the stone and steel of your own hometown?